Mystery and disgrace surround the name of Lee Harvey Oswald, the man accused of assassinating U.S. President John Fitzgerald Kennedy in Dallas. It is strange and unusual to find oneself in a city where he is remembered fondly and spoken of with warmth, and where people refuse to believe he was guilty. "I just like the guy," recalls Ernst Titovets, a medical student who befriended Lee Harvey Oswald when the American defector arrived in Minsk, the capital of the Belarusian Soviet Socialist Republic, in 1959. They went to dances and concerts together, played pranks, and eagerly pursued young female students. Oswald admired Russian women and said they were much more attractive and sexually experienced than American women. Titovets, who spoke English well, helped Oswald meet his future wife Marina, whom he described as blatantly sexually attractive. Oswald, a former Marine, was 20 years old when he arrived in the USSR, considering himself a Marxist. However, the KGB initially paid little attention to this and rejected his request to remain in the Soviet Union. On the day his tourist visa expired, Oswald slashed his wrist with a knife. Fearing an international incident if he tried it again, Soviet authorities allowed him to stay. He was sent to Minsk, a provincial capital at the time so remote it was almost like Siberia. He was given a job at a radio and television factory and assigned a one-room apartment in the city center. Oswald basked in attention, as he was one of the few foreigners and the only American in Minsk. He frequently visited the nearby women's dormitory. He loved being the center of attention in a group, especially when young women were around. The KGB kept Oswald under surveillance. His apartment was bugged, and even a small hole was drilled into the wall to observe his most intimate moments. Only after the collapse of the USSR did Titovets, Oswald's friend, realize how intense the surveillance had been. Even the choice of his downtown apartment was no coincidence. He was placed in a carefully chosen location to make it easy to monitor his every move, says Titovets. At first, the KGB suspected Oswald was working for the CIA, and his attempts to learn Russian were seen as a clever ruse to lower their guard. However, Norman Mailer, one of the few granted access to the KGB file on Oswald, wrote in his 1995 biography that instead of catching him spilling secrets in moments of intimacy, the KGB mostly recorded domestic arguments. And there were plenty of those between Marina and Oswald. The young couple often quarreled, accusing each other of laziness and trading insults. The romantic from America even hit his Russian wife, though she responded with a solid slap. One of Oswald's biographers claims he saw himself as a Marxist, a revolutionary, who was part of something big. But the underlying reason for his defection was more psychological than ideological. "I think he went there because he didn't feel like he belonged anywhere. He was a desperate, lonely young man, and he believed Russia would save him," the biographer adds. Before meeting Marina Prusakova, Oswald had proposed to a young woman named Ella German. Her rejection led to a growing sense of isolation, detachment, bitterness, and alienation. His marriage, the biographer believes, failed to overcome these feelings. Titovets notes that Oswald began to grow irritated with life in the Soviet Union. He started to snap. "Every time our discussion touched on the differences between the Soviet Union, how life was arranged here, and the United States, I would say, 'You are unfair to your colored population,'" says Titovets. And he would admit it, say, "Yes," but then he would say, "And you here, you live like slaves." In 1999, an American journalist, originally from the Soviet Union, met one of Oswald's former acquaintances, Vladimir Zidovich. Like others, he said, Oswald was a good guy, and it was impossible to imagine that he was a murderer. As a parting request, he asked a favor. If the journalist ever found himself in Texas, could he lay flowers on Oswald's grave, on his behalf, and on behalf of Oswald's former colleagues at the Horizon factory in Minsk?